Beck, are you coming tonight? I hope so. I got something for you. The text message glowed on his phone. From Darren, one of his more unorthodox friends who was always trying to get Beck to loosen up. No telling what he had planned tonight that he claimed to be so exciting. Beck Sterling, the millionaire with everything, felt the familiar emptiness. Another party, another sea of faces, another night of pretending to be someone he wasn't. Yeah, I'll be there. He typed back, already wishing that the party was over. The party was a sensory overload. Music pulsed through his veins, the lights strobed in a chaotic symphony of color, and the air thrummed with the energy of 100 shallow conversations. Darren, eyes too bright, a mantic grin plastered on his face, he pressed a drink into Beck's hand. Just a little something to loosen you up, he chuckled, a predatory glint in his eyes. Beck, normally cautious, found himself so unamused by the night's agonizing stream of pointless conversations, filled with the expected aimless direction that they usually had, that he had taken the drink, neglected to realize it was the something so exciting that Darren had mentioned before the party. As the night went on, the world began to fracture, and the colors bled into each other. The music warped into a distorted symphony. Unsure of what was going on at first, the drink and Darren's smirk had came into his memory, along with the text from before the party. Darren saw Beck from afar, looking confused, and walked up to him, saying, "Hey, how are you doing, my dude?" "What did you give me?" Beck asked, looking around at the increasingly changing world, and Darren smiled and patted him on the shoulder. "The gift of sight, brother. LSD. Just think of it as a new lens to see the world through." Beck flashed a look of mild concern to Darren. Darren softened his look and said, "Just relax, man. It'll be alright. It'll open your mind." Beck thought to himself, "It's already taken, so I've no sense in fighting it." He nodded to Darren, and the rest of the night went a lot better than he ever would have guessed. Through this unlocked perception of things, he discovered a forbidden taste of something he hadn't known he'd craved. When the drug wore off the following morning, the world snapped back into focus, leaving him with a hollow ache, yearning for something he couldn't quite name. He knew it wasn't the drug itself, but it was something that gave him a look into the world in the way he hadn't before. Like there was much more than meets the eye in life, and he wanted more of it. Darren called later to see how he was doing after his night, and Beck told him about how it had given him a strange desire to seek out more information, and wasn't even sure what yet, just knew it was something. Darren assumed that Beck was talking about being under the influence of LSD, but Beck quickly corrected him by stating, "No, it's not that. It's just, it showed me that there's more to all this, and I can't get it out of my head. There's more I need to find out. I gotta go, man." And before Darren could say anything, Beck had hung up the phone, leaving Darren somewhat happy to see that a kind of genuine interest found his friend again. And with that, he left Beck to his newfound interest, satisfied with the whole ordeal. Beck called one of his assistants and instructed him to order a computer, a decent one, to begin his research. Since he hadn't needed one that exceeded his phone's abilities prior to this, decided it would make the task a bit more convenient. Then the next few weeks consisted of Beck immersing himself into all things related to reality and quantum understanding until he found himself at the same roadblocks that today's science has been halted by. Shrouded in and around very strange phenomena and unexplainable things like the double slit experiment and limits like the Planck length, and along with other things that scientists and some of the other great minds of our time had found themselves scratching their heads about for years. Then came across a particular topic that caught his undivided attention. It's called the Kozyrev Mirror. A Russian scientist discovered that time, a physical thing, like light and other matter, can be altered, sped up, slowed down, even stopped, possibly reversed. And then, using the Fibonacci sequence, he experimented with different materials until he discovered aluminum worked the best and made a spiraled aluminum chamber to amplify human consciousness, and the result far exceeded expectations, leading to all kinds of crazy documented occurrences with time alteration and communication across the globe, etc. Some even claim to have encountered entities, some good, some not so good. Beck was hooked. So deep into that there was no peripheral at all. His focus on this was absolute. And what made matters even better was that he found right next to the Gateway Experience PDF that there was drawings and plans to build it that had been released to the public. And the material even someone poor could obtain. This excited Beck. With his vast resources, he could construct a high-quality mirror. Beck had decided to do some more looking into some researchers that were into pseudoscience and knew that they would jump on the opportunity to be able to research that kind of stuff and be paid to do it at the same time. So he found the best that money could buy, which is Dr. Thorne. It didn't take long for the mansion, once a symbol of his wealth and success, to become a clandestine laboratory. And Dr. Eris Thorne, a physicist, oversaw the construction of the mirror. Beck spared no expense, and driven by the obsession that consumed him, and Thorne, initially intrigued, watched with a growing unease as the mirror took shape. Beck, blinded by his ravenous hunger for whatever it was he thought this project would bring, was oblivious to some of the unusual things going on around the lab at first. Thorne, however, was not. He'd always been pretty sensitive to the unseen. The air in the mansion crackled with a strange energy. A subtle hum vibrated in his teeth and set his skin crawling. He started noticing oddities, small at first, a misplaced tool that reappeared exactly where he had looked for it just moments ago. A flicker at the edge of his vision, like somebody had walked past, yet the hallway still remained empty. Then came the repetitions. "Good morning, Dr. Thorne." One of the construction workers, a burly man named Frank, greeted him with a cheerful grin. Thorne nodded in response, preoccupied with the alignment of the mirror's frame. Frank continued past into the other room, then from the same direction. "Good morning, Dr. Thorne," said Frank, leaving Dr. Thorne stunned and a strange sense of deja vu and a dread that was becoming more and more difficult to shake. The following morning, Beck had been waiting for a package to arrive that had some of the key things that he and Dr. Thorne had decided to add to the mirror to enhance it, but it was still 3 days from arriving. Deep in thought and impatient about the package, he looked up from washing his face in the sink and noticed that his reflection seemed to be lagging behind his actual movements. This made him uneasy as he moved his hand and saw the reflection trail behind. As he was lost in this happening, a voice startled him, and he looked over to the source, and it was the maid picking up his laundry, staring at him with unease. "Mr. Sterling, are you okay? What's been going on lately?" "Nothing," Beck said, with a dismissive tone, and told her to get the laundry later, sending her on her way out the door, with the brief thought that the staff is starting to realize strange things are starting to happen. As he heard her leave and the door shut behind her, he was jolted back to the same voice as before and looking back over where she just was, to see the maid saying, "Mr. Sterling, are you okay? What's been going on lately?" He didn't respond. His eyes widened with disbelief. Something told him that this was some kind of time lapse, or he wasn't sure, but Beck, however, remained immune to these kind of things, and the disturbances weren't enough to make him stop. His focus was singular, his obsession all-consuming, and he peered over the mirror schematics, his eyes burning with a feverish intensity. He barely slept, he barely ate, his entire being consumed by the pursuit of the more he had glimpsed during the drug-induced hallucination. And as his obsession deepened, so too did the creature's influence. A voice at first, smooth and seductive, began to whisper in the back of Beck's mind. It spoke of hidden knowledge, a forbidden power, of a reality beyond human comprehension. It lured him with promises of transcendence, of becoming something more than human. Beck, already teetering on the edge of obsession, readily embraced these whispers, his desire for more overriding any sense of caution or fear. And one afternoon, while staring at his reflection in the bathroom mirror, Beck saw it. A flicker of something dark and alien. A subtle distortion of his features. He blinked and it was gone. But the voice in his head remained stronger now, more insistent. "Don't be afraid," it whispered. "Embrace the change. Become what you were meant to be." Beck, his mind clouded by the obsession, and the creature's insidious whispers felt the thrill course through him. He was on the verge of something big, something that would change his life. He just needed to take that final step, to surrender to the call of the mirror. Then a voice startled him. He saw the same maid. "Mr. Sterling, are you okay? What's been going on lately?" He pushed past her to get to the lab. The mirror, now nearing completion, hummed in a low, resonant energy. Thorn, his fear battling with his scientific curiosity, watched Beck approach the mirror, his face pale, his eyes burning with an unnatural light. "Mr. Sterling," Thorn began, his voice trembling, "perhaps we should..." But Beck didn't hear him. He was already lost in the thrall of the mirror, his gaze fixed on the swirling depths within. He entered the chamber and reached out, his fingers trembling with anticipation. And as he touched the mirror's surface, in that exact moment, time stopped, and the world dissolved around him. He felt the embrace of understanding like he wanted. But what he began to understand, however, wasn't what he had anticipated. Locked in place, as he felt an ancient cold seep deep into the marrow of his bones, pushing out the essence of what was him. An overwhelming sense of pain that was indescribable, as if every ounce of flesh and viscera was being pulled off at once like a husk of a corn cob. The agony was blinding. And once he gained his senses, he looked up to see that he was seeing his reflection. "Wait," he thought. "That's not my reflection. That's me." He looked down to see himself, but to his disbelief, he saw just darkness. He was trapped in a purgatory as the creature settled into his new body, the morphing black blotches of skin fading, and the demonic glint in his eyes retracted to a relatively normal look. The creature adjusted his tie, and he got really close to the mirror, and Beck pounded on the other side with the terrifying understanding that he had sealed his fate. And the creature whispered to him, "Embrace the change, Beck. Get comfortable. You're going to get to know exactly what you wanted. I sat there since before your planet was even molded into a cooling rock, and I'm finally out, and I plan on staying that way." As it winked and walked out, Beck, in shock, couldn't even find it in him to scream or beg. The creature walked out and looked around in Beck's body. Dr. Thorne immediately knew something wasn't right. The creature smiled and said, "Dr. Thorne, how familiar are you with Ouija boards?"